Coming up, what an excellent day for Jesuit Dean. Well, howdy, folks, and welcome to Minute 8 of The Exorcist Minute, a show where we endeavor to examine, extrapolate, and excavate The Exorcist minute by terrifying minute. My name is Lester Clark.
And I am Kynan Diaz.
And we will be your holy guides on this journey through what some have called the scariest movie of all time. Okay, so I'm confused. Kynan, this whole time, we might have been addressing this guy by the wrong name. So, folks, let's be clear here. We are talking about Father Merrin's friend in the last minute, whom we say goodbye to in this minute. In the book, this is the curator of antiquities. He is described in the book as the, quote, Arab curator. So we assume he lives here. This is his city. And Father Merrin is visiting. And I had this whole thing in the last minute about how these two men from two different religions are friends, and they're working together on this dig, and they love each other. And it's a unique and beautiful friendship in the face of this racism and in the face of this othering that we had back in those days and still today between Muslims and Christians, and just how beautiful and pure and thematically relevant this friendship was. And then I pause the movie and I see that the name of this character is Jesuit Dean.
So this is in the like the Amazon whatever they call it, the X-ray thing that tells you what the character's name is, or
precisely. And I would never have known it, except we examine this film minute by minute. So I'm pausing and I'm rewinding, and I see this guy's face pop up, and underneath it says Jesuit Dean, and I'm like, what? And yes, folks, I know that's not his name. I know that's his title. I know that he must be the dean of some. I guess this is a school, a university, with an office of antiquities. I don't know anymore, okay? Up is no longer up, and I'm going through a crisis of faith, and the curator of antiquities is a guy named Jesuit Dean. And he hangs out with Catholic Carl and Protestant Pete and Lutheran Larry, and they're all in the bar having a drink with the Exorcist and the Babadook.
They can still like each other, right? Even if they're Jesuit Dean and Protestant Pete and all that.
Oh, no, of course.
So all your ideas about friendship can still stand.
Okay. Just as long as that still flies. Okay.
So you read the book and you see that his name is he's the Arab curator. Mm-hmm. So then we read from the screenplay last week. So I was like, did we just imagine that? Where in the screenplay it says that he's the Arab curator? No, we looked it back up again. He is the Arab curator in the screenplay. Yes. So somewhere between them shooting it, casting this guy, Roy Cooper, who plays this character, I guess they've named him Jesuit Dean because that's what it says on IMDb as well. So at some point, I hesitate to look at the credits at the end because I don't want to jump far ahead in the movie,
right?
To look for things. But yes, at some point they've named this character and changed it.
In all seriousness, I don't know why the change, because it doesn't seem to matter. It comes to nothing either way. Like, okay, fine. He's the dean of a university. We don't see the university. The university doesn't play a part in their interaction. In fact, in their interaction, he's very much playing the part of a curator of antiquities, mostly because the only time we see him is in an office surrounded by antiquities, which I assume he curated.
Right. So I guess that's the question, right? Have we been, we've been led astray, I guess, by reading the script and the movie. But our audiences who might have shared our understanding of this as being a Muslim character, where are they getting that? Is it just because he seems to have been from this city, and so it's impossible that he is a Christian, and impossible that he is a Catholic, and impossible he's a Jesuit? Is it because he's writing in Arabic that we assume that he's none of those things?
You're right. I guess he could be. I guess it could be that he has converted to Catholicism, and this is like the Iraqi branch of the Jesuit missions, I guess. But that's so much more stuff that doesn't matter. And I say it doesn't matter. And yet here I am. We haven't even started this minute. And I'm on my third paragraph in my notes about Jesuit Dean. And just to be clear, folks, I'm not, because it sounded like I was ranting about him being a Jesuit and not,
How could you be a Christian?
Right? No.
How dare you be a Christian?
No, it was the switch from a museum or antiquities office to a school, and how we didn't even really need to know that.
Right. Why would they have made those changes, especially when it seems like we have documentary evidence that they shot it as a museum, and then they relabeled at some point upon the release, when they're making the credits or releasing it, that this is now a university.
Right. And that's one of the things I saw in the Amazon X-ray as well. It's like one of the scenes is titled Merrin Goes Back to the University. And I'm like, that's a university? I never knew that was
clearly a museum. Right. This is frustrating. Again, it's apropos of nothing, but when you're trying to solve every mystery you can of The Exorcist, like as if that's possible, again, with a well-made film from almost 50 years ago or over 50 years ago, right? All right. You want to look at our minute?
Yeah. Let's open this show up. Yeah. So our minute begins with an embrace between Father Merrin and Jesuit Dean.
And don't worry, it ends with Father Merrin walking through a covered alleyway with this character nowhere there.
Yes, so. Right. Which I love this character. I would like to see more of him.
We were such big fans of him last time we recorded.
He's awesome. So we follow Merrin as he leaves his friend and moves into the bustling streets of Mosul, which are not, in fact, gloomy as both the book and the screenplay wants us to have it, but rather the opposite. I see light, I see life, I see children in a big group of what could maybe be a field trip, probably visiting the museum. Oh, okay, all right. Maybe it is a school. Okay, fine. Hang on. But what strikes me here is that the city, the world, is going on without Merrin. He is moving through it like he's invisible, almost like a ghost. But the book and the screenplay linger on the curator to show that he feels something leaving along with Merrin, a sense of safety, a sense of peace. But we don't have that here. It's almost like nobody notices him at all. And this is reinforced in the next shot where we have a bunch of people bowing in prayer away from him in what I'm certain must be a deliberate shot. Am I right? To have them all showing their butts at him?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. And the only thing I can think is that with this shot, Friedkin is showing us that this man does not belong. He is not of this city. He is not of this country. He is an outsider. And so here I think we have the first theme that we talked about last time, the theme of isolation. Even in the midst of this sprawling city with all its life, our man in khakis, our Father Merrin, is isolated. And this happens as soon as he leaves the warmth of his friend's embrace. And he's going to be alone from here on out. Even we, the audience, are going to leave him and go visit some other sad people. So he is going to cease to exist for a while. We are going to completely forget about him, about Iraq, about this prologue, all this stuff. It's going to be like some kind of weird dream we can't remember.
Oh, I like that a lot, Lester. And there's this idea in film studies that film is dreamlike. We use this fancy French term, which is oniric, Oneiric. Have you heard that in any non-film context? I'm not sure.
I have heard of that word.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah, I wonder. It's so closely tied to film theory. And the idea is, right, that films are dreamlike. We can have plots like this, a whole 10-minute sequence of this that just go away. And if we never saw Father Merrin again, we wouldn't be questioning that until maybe afterwards, after we were done with the film. And people compare like the movie-going experience of sitting in a dark room and having your body relax and then having images incepted directly into your brain against your will as very dreamlike. And then even afterwards, the lights come on and you sort of have to stretch yourself awake, even though you've been awake the entire time.
Right.
And then you even struggle to remember the exact details of this 2-hour experience you had that was so emotionally fraught, but isn't quite logically all in place. And then, Lester, let me give you this sort of thought experiment people have. Because you've probably experienced dreams that feel like movies to you. You might describe them that way. The other week I woke up and I was like, I just dreamed a movie. I better write that down. So you sort of had these experiences. People have this documented throughout the 20th century, and it's not quite documented before that people, before we invented movies, people weren't describing their dreams that way. So it's sort of an open question, like did we start dreaming the way that movies are, or did we create the movies to be like our dreams?
Oh, that is a fascinating question.
We don't know.
We don't know.
Short answer, we don't know. Yes.
Like so many things.
Like so many things. Like, what's this character's name that we have here? Yeah, so I like the idea of it being dreamlike. We've already talked about some logical inconsistencies with this sequence that shouldn't make sense, or that feel like they are saying things are happening that other characters aren't seeing.
Right.
So if your thought about him walking through and being a ghost is really interesting, especially when we move on, and because you say in this part of it, it's like he doesn't exist, right? He walks by blacksmiths who then do not look at him, when before we had seen these people, in the minute before, who were doing their jobs, and they're looking very intensely at him.
Yes.
The man who's bringing him the tea. We have a bunch of other people at another table who just stare at him. And then he has this, and then the blacksmith, of course. And then he has this sort of moment of respite with his friend. And then we kind of repeat the same kind of logic of that, him like walking through spaces and no one sees him. And then we're going to see people again, like really, really staring at him.
Oh, I didn't even pick that up. That in the previous minutes, he was being watched very, very closely.
Right, to a point that it bothers him.
Yes. But we are still with him now as he moves from the light of the museum and the city into this narrow, crowded street full of people, all in shadow, as the light streams feebly from the grates in the ceiling. This single ray of light is just, it barely manages to get in. And so we see that outside the sun is still shining, but here it's almost as if we are underground. And then we see maybe it's a sort of tunnel or shaded pathway to protect from the sun, maybe. In any case, it sort of goes back to what you were saying, Kynan, about time and how there's really nothing here to tell us precisely what time period we're in. I mean, it almost seems like a whole other world from the museum and the area around the museum with the students and whatnot. Any reason you think Friedkin chose this like a dark alley? It's definitely not in the book. It's definitely not in the screenplay.
Yeah, and as you say, like he is walking through completely unnoticed, right? So he keeps our attention, but everyone else is just doing their own thing around him. I think it's really interesting to go from such high contrasts, right? So outside, as you say, it's very light. There's lots of youth and young people around, and if we pay attention to the sound again, right, it doesn't. We've gone before he sees the curator to this like heavy metal clanging, and that goes away in the sequence, and it's all just happy voices, right? So then even as he's going through this dark area, like you might say, oh, these are his inner thoughts, right? It feels dark and scary. The world actually is moving on. They're not seeing it as dark and scary, and it's rather happy. It's rather happy sounds, or at least like lively sounds.
I'm going to try to pin this down. I'm going to try to explain this. This is film school freshman Lester. So Kynan, Professor Kynan, he starts out in the desert where he meets the devil. As soon as he does, he is filled with both purpose and also doubt. He knows what he has to do. From the moment he sees the amulet, he knows what he has to do, but he is afraid. In the next scene, he is tempted to call off his final quest, tempted not to go, tempted to stay in the office. That's where he's wrestling with it. He's looking at the Joseph medallion, and then he's looking at the Pazuzu amulet. He's turning this problem over in his mind. For how long? We don't know. We don't know, Kynan, because time has stopped. Could be 40 minutes. Could be 40 days.
But a lot of minutes or a lot of days.
A lot of minutes, a lot of days, right?
40 of them, right?
Yes. And he says, no, I have to go. He says goodbye to his friend. He says goodbye to the light and the life of the city, and he descends into darkness.
It is interesting that you're talking about like being tempted just by not continuing on with the quest, which is something that Joseph Campbell talks a lot about in his analysis of what he called the monomyth, or you might know as the hero's journey, of like, at many opportunities, the hero is given the opportunity just to stop being a hero. In Act 1 that happens, in the middle of Act 2 that happens, towards the end before the big final bad that happens, and of course, biblically that happens, like the temptation of Jesus. Satan goes to him in the desert, which we're sort of recalling here, isn't something salacious. It's, I can let you be a king here. I could let you not have to be the son of man anymore. You just don't have to worry about these things.
Kynan, you mentioned the monomyth, the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell. And I always thought it was very interesting that this is a hero at the end of his journey. We're starting this story with somebody who is finishing their own story. And I find that really, really fascinating.
Right. Chris Vogler, who writes screenwriting books interpreting Joseph Campbell, he defines like the mentor character, say like the Obi-Wan Kenobi as being like the most archetypical. That is someone that is a hero from another story who is now there as a mentor to give advice from their own journey and their own tribulations.
Yes.
So in many ways, we have Merrin here, who by all accounts looks like our main character until we find out that he's not. That Damien is our main character. Like we get the glimpse that he's done this before.
Yes, very much a Kenobi type. So he descends into darkness, and this is going to continue. We're going to see him traverse a bunch of different landscapes, but he's not wandering through these streets and alleyways. He's not lost. He definitely has a purpose, and he is heading to it.
So I want to talk about the visual structure of this minute. Again, there's not a whole lot of dialogue here. So how are we conveying, a lot of what you're talking about to the audience? A lot of it is in light and performance and sound, which is, incredibly valid. But I think there's some really interesting things that we're doing again with architecture and with the shape of the scene, as we talked about when we were in the curator's office or Jesuit Dean's office. When Father Merrin is with his friend, as we have at the very beginning of our shot, we tend to have a back wall that is parallel with the camera. We have a lot of depth here, but it's not, sharp angles or anything. We have 1 point perspective basically going into the edge. And it feels like if that wall wasn't there behind him, we can go on to infinity. And we have these tiles that are a strict pattern. And then as Father Merrin is walking out into the courtyard, as you say, full of life, he's embracing his friend. We see a pair of Arab men coming, and they're friends as well. And then when he is sort of alone, then that group of school children that you're talking about starts to become a diagonal line sort of intersecting and breaking up that kind of harmony that Father Merrin has when he's with his buddy. So as he starts to, to be alone, we start to have more diagonals. Father Merrin's moving towards the camera. And then as you point out, we have this line of men praying to Mecca. And we have it in 2 shots. So the first is in these close-ups of the men, and they're forming this diagonal from upper left to lower right. And then when we have Father Merrin come in, even though, as you say, they're pointing their butts at him and all that, now the line that they're forming is going in the opposite direction from the upper right to the lower left. So again, like he's isolated and he's lost, but it's also, it's also happening in the geography of things and just the basic shapes we have. So, this is the kind of thing that you can really look at when you're doing the movie minute by minute. You're kind of reverse engineering what the filmmakers were doing. The director, the director and the cinematographer, what they're doing is trying to interpret what the script is saying to us, and how do we put that through, not just through light and things that the audience might notice, but shape, composition wise. So we haven't talked about the cinematographer. I'm sure we'll have other times to do that. Owen Reisman, who is a major cinematographer. And then when Father Merrin goes into this alleyway, he starts to move, upper left to lower right in a sort of diagonal motion again.
Right.
Yeah, just in general, people will say that like round shapes are the most serene and secure, and then if they're more 90 degrees or have a little bit more tension, more dynamism, and then these diagonals really break up the image and tend to be the most fraught. It's just something you look at. And when we're looking at this beat by beat, it's much easier for us to do this. And some people actually take images and shots of movies and try to turn them into, using some kind of computer technology they don't know, and just turn them into like their basic shape. So basically you're losing some of the texture there, and you're just seeing like, what are the lines here? And I'm sure that's very easy technology. There's some app probably for that. But yeah, just seeing what the actual lines are here.
Right. Oh, and that is why I am so happy that you're doing this with me, Kynan, because that is not even a place that my mind goes for those things. Just the choice to have him walking from left to right, or from right to left, or from, I'm going to use stage terms, but like upstage to downstage, or coming towards the camera or walking away from the camera. These are all choices that Friedkin had to make. And they all, at least in his mind and what he hopes is conveyed to us, like communicates something to us, maybe on a conscious or a subconscious level.
Right. He might be producing these things instinctually or unconsciously. But typically, if it's someone who is a good director, whatever that means, right, they tend to match up with what the audience is experiencing as opposed to being random.
That is just so cool. All right. Well, Kynan, do you have anything else for this minute?
No, I think we got a lot.
All righty. Until next time, folks.
The power of Jesuit Dean compels you.
Jesuit Dean.